Welcome back to myjewelrybench.com. It's Pete here, and I just want to cover this today. We're going to be making this two-stone mother's ring. We'll be using a few tools in Blender to do so. We'll be using the Jewelcraft add-on. I hope you have that. If you don't, there'll be a description where you can get it in the description box below. Also, we'll be using the boolean modifiers, both destructive and non-destructive mode. We'll be using the curve modifier, the remesh modifier, and a couple other little tools in there just to make this particular ring. The nice thing about this is in Blender you can make this as complicated or as simple as you want. So if you have a mom with 3 kids, 4 kids, you can add as many stones and names as you like. Use any particular font, and I'm going to show you how to do that today. Okay guys, so before I get started with this family ring or this mother's ring, I wanted to show you the results of a design that I did. I did a video on this. I'll link it up in the upper right corner of this video so you can click on it. Here's the casting results and the finished product. I think this ring came out fantastic. I used iFun Red jewelry castable resin on this, and it seems to have come out quite well. Okay, so we're going to get started with this ring, and the first thing we need to do is we need to create the ring. So we're going to do that using curves. I'm going to do a Shift A, and you've noticed I've got my screencast keys out on the lower left corner. I'm going to come up here to circle, and we're going to add in a circle. I need to make this circle approximately 16.5 millimeters in diameter, so I'm going to come over and I'm going to adjust that. 16.5 by 16.5. We can leave it on the Z-axis the way it is. The next step I want to do is rotate this 90 degrees on the X-axis. So I'll hit R and X, then 90, and I've rotated that 90 degrees. As you can see, it's standing up. From this point on, I'm going to go in and use the tools for the curve, the tab here. So we're going to come over to geometry. I'm going to hit that, and we're going to extrude this. And because I'll be using 2 millimeter stones on this ring, I'm going to adjust the Z-axis, which will now be the Y-axis. And I'm going to make that approximately 5 millimeters. So now our ring is 5 millimeters, and we can go from there. So our ring is 5 millimeters wide, and we've got it there. I'm going to adjust a couple things here. I'm going to take the resolution. I'm going to drop that up to, or bring that up to 36, not 360. And that gives us a little bit more dimension. Now, maybe I'll bring that up to 48 just to cover myself. I think that'll give us a little more detail in the ring. The next step is to add a modifier to this. We know that our ring is going to be approximately 5 millimeters wide at the top. It'll be narrower at the bottom. I'm going to show you how to do that. But we also want to solidify this, so we want to make it thick, and we want to make it thick from the perimeter out. So to do that, I'm going to come over to the modifiers tab. I'm going to add in a solidify modifier, and I am going to use the thickness tool, and I'm going to bring that down. I'm moving that to the negative values so that it rotates or gives us some dimension from the perimeter out, and I want to make it about yay thick. I think that looks pretty good so far. I'm going to play with this a little bit. Let's shade this flat so that we see what it looks like. Okay, so far so good. I like the way that looks. Now I'm not going to worry about my inside diameter so much yet, but I am going to round off the outside perimeter of this. To do that, I actually have to convert this over to a mesh. So with the ring selected on your viewport screen, I'm going to right click on the ring. I'm going to come down to convert to mesh right here. Now we've done that, and here is our Bezier circle. We're going to rename this ring shank. And I'm going to move that out to the scene collection just to keep my life easy. And I'm going to hide everything else. So far so good. Okay. Now I've got that, and I want to make this a little bit narrower at the bottom. To do that, I'm going to hit the Tab key. I'm going to look at this from the side view. I'm going to come over here, press the Alt key on my keypad, and make sure that you have the edge tool or the edge loop or the edge selected up here in the upper left corner. So with that done, I'm going to hold the Shift key down and select this middle edge right here. What that does, guys, is it selects the entire perimeter of that. And now we're going to use perspective scaling. So up here in the middle of our viewport screen, you can see right here, I've got perspective scaling off. I'm going to hit that, and then I'm going to press S, then Y, and then I can adjust the narrowness of the bottom of this ring shank. Now you can see, because my circle of influence is so small, I'm going to have to raise that up. So we're just going to make that a little bit bigger, just about like so. And I'm going to bring that up just a little bit like that. Okay, I like the way that looks. If we look at it from the side view, I think that looks pretty good. That's a nice taper. Okay, the next step is to modify this a little bit. I'm going to size this down. I'm going to size this down. I'm going to hit S and then 0.95. I think that's pretty good. Now I want to create a circle in the middle so that I've got an outline for a size 7 finger. Shift A, mesh. I'm going to select cylinder right there. And we'll give our cylinder some properties. So hit this little tab down here and change that to 150. That gives us much more detail within the parameter of our lines or faces around the curvature of the cylinder. So I'm going to hit RX90 to rotate that. And I'm going to come over and look at this from the side view again. And I'm going to size that up until I get it to 16.5. So right about there. Okay, I'm going to turn on invisible mode so I can see through my finger hole. And now I'm going to move this. I'm going to actually size this down a little bit. About like that. So I'm sizing my ring shank down. And now the cylinder, I'm just going to move that down so it's narrower at the bottom than it is at the top. We want a wide surface on top. And I like the way that looks. I'm going to select my ring just a little bit more and size that up just a little bit. About like that. I think that's good. And I'm going to bring this down just a shade, or bring that up just a shade so that my cutout is going to be somewhat inside the entire perimeter of the ring. With that done, I'm just going to leave it like that for now. I'm also going to turn off invisible mode. I'm going to come over to my ring shank, hit tab key, and now I want to apply a beveled edge to the parameter of this particular ring. Now before I do that, let's just do Control A and apply the rotation and scale. That'll just make life a little bit easier for us when we apply other modifiers or functions to this particular ring shank. Hit tab, go into edit mode, make sure your edge loop is selected here, and then we're going to hit Alt and select the outer perimeter of our ring. I'm going to hold the Shift key down, select Alt again, and then select the opposite side, just like so. So you should have that orange perimeter around both the left and right side of the ring. With that done, I'm going to press Control B, and I'm going to bring that out and bevel the edge just a little bit, and I'll give that a few cuts there, about like so. Press Tab to go into object mode, and so far so good. I kind of like the way that looks. Now it's time to cut out our finger hole size for this particular ring. So with the cutout selected, I'm going to hold the Shift key down and select our ring shank, and I'm going to apply a boolean difference to that. So I'll come over to my boolean tab and apply a difference. And you can see it cuts out a perfectly round hole, leaving us with a narrow bottom or a thinner bottom. Then we have a wider top, which is what we want because our stones are going to be protruding into the surface of this particular ring, and we want to make sure we have enough space there. Okay, with that done, if I wanted to make any changes, I could have done it before this. You can also use a non-destructive boolean difference and play with the parameters and adjust everything as you want. So for instance, if I wanted to do a non-destructive mode and then play with things a little bit, I can select our cutout tool, hold the Shift key down, select our ring shank, and then do a non-destructive boolean modifier. And if I look at this now, I can actually play with this, and I can select our ring shank. I can size this up and down, and what it does is it allows me to adjust the cutout how I want it. So you can see, like, I'm keeping my finger size the exact same, but I'm adjusting the thinness of the band. So I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to leave it about just like so. That looks good. Now I'm just going to apply that, and there's our cutout or our ring shank. The next thing I have to do is a couple of things here. I need to, in this particular example, we're only putting 2 names on this ring, but you can put as many as you want or as you can fit. And the beauty of this designing in Blender is that you can make a ring big enough to handle however many kids somebody has. So if somebody has 5 children and they want a ring with 5 stones on it and their names with it, you can kind of design it any way you want. I'm giving you the basics, but you can expand on it from here. So for instance, what I want to do now is create a circle or a curve object where I can rotate my gems around the surface of this particular ring. And to do that, what I have to do is this. Hit Shift A. I'm going to create a new curve and a circle. We're going to add that. I'm going to rotate that on the x-axis, RX90. And now I'm going to size this up to the outside perimeter of our ring. Just like so. So it's just above the perimeter of our ring shank. Okay. Now we're going to call this particular Bezier curve. We'll name that path. And again, I'm just going to move this over to our scene. Okay. Now, there's two processes you have to do following this. We have to place the gemstones, and we have to use the text tool to add some text and then make it conform to the path. So what we're going to do is start with the two gemstones. And there's two ways of handling this. Sometimes I use one path, sometimes I'll use two. And I think what I'm going to do here is to use two paths. So I'm going to call this path 1. I'm going to duplicate this, Shift D, and press Enter, and I'm going to move this over to about here. I'm going to grab our first path. I'm going to move that over to the right. So if I'm looking at this from the side, I want these about in the same spot on either side of the ring. I think that's just about right. Just like that. And now this new path that we just created, I'm going to call this path 2. Okay, that's done. Now let's add in the gemstones. So I'm going to come over, I'm going to use Jewelcraft to add in my gemstones. Again, I'm using a 2mm gemstone, 2.0mm. The first one is going to be a ruby, so I'll just select ruby from the drop-down list. Or you could just add in a gemstone from within Blender's models. We will add that there. We're doing round stones, so that's good. Just the way I like it. And now what I want to do is I want to align that to the path. I'm going to use path 1. So we'll select our gemstone, hold the Shift key down, select the path 1, I believe. There we go. And I'm going to put distribute onto curve. So now Jewelcraft adds 10, so we're just going to change that to 1. And 1 is at the bottom. Now we want the starting position to be more at the top, so I'm going to take my end position. I'm going to move that over to the top, just like so. And I am going to tilt that 90 degrees. You know, maybe we have to do that 270 degrees. 270. There we go. And I want to offset that a little bit, so I'm going to use the offset tool. Oh, we've got absolute offset. I'm just going to bring that down just a little bit like that, because this will be inset a little bit. That looks good right about there. Okay. Okay, so now let's work on the second gemstone. That is going to be, let's say in this case, let's do an emerald. So we're going to come down to gemstones. We're going to select emerald. Right there, we're going to add in the emerald. I'm going to hit OK. And there's our emerald. Now we want this to be along path 2. So I'm going to select that, hold the Shift key down, and select path 2. And again, distribute on curve. Now you can see it uses the same parameters as our other, which is nice. And again, we want to move that over just a little bit because you can see they're touching. We want them offset a little bit. So I'm going to hit, let's see here, -45. And then this one, let's grab our path and recalculate that. And let's say we want this -55. Okay, so I've got those offset. That looks about good. Our stones are placed on our curve, and we're not going to do anything with those just yet. What I need to do now is work on the text, so the two names that we're going to be working with. Now, this is where it can get kind of fancy. You can use just about any font you want, but there are some things that you're going to have to consider when working with fonts because they are curve objects. So they have similar properties as the curve objects do instead of the mesh objects. So let's do this here. Shift A, we're going to add in a new text object. And I'm going to scroll in here so we can see it. I'm going to hit Tab to go into edit mode. I'm going to change this to John. Press Tab to go into object mode, and now I can start working on the properties for the text for the name John. I'm going to come over here to our text tool. Under geometry, I'm going to extrude this a bit and make that a little bit thicker. Now, this is where it can get real fun. Maybe you just don't want this typical block font. You want some other different font. So under the Fonts tab, you can select fonts by clicking this little folder here under Regular. So I'm going to select that. And now I've got about 500 fonts in my font folder, and I can go select pretty much whatever font I want to use. Let's pick this roller coaster font. Like I said, typically the thicker the font, the better. So I'm going to click on that. I'm going to hit Open Font. And now you can see it changed our font over to that particular style. That's kind of what I'm looking for. Okay, I've got that done. I am going to hit Shift D to press Enter, so I'm duplicating the word John. I'm going to move that up. I'm going to move that over here. I'm going to press Tab and Backspace, and we'll call this, let's see, how about Wendy? Okay, Tab out of that, and there is our text there. And if we want to, we can change the way that text works. So if we want to increase the spacing on either of these, I can. If I select that, I can come over here to Font. And I believe under Spacing, Character Spacing, somewhere, here we go. I can change that over to 1.01. It gives me a nice space in between, and we're kind of looking for that. I'm going to do the same over here with the name John. Okay, that looks good so far. I'm also going to increase, like we did with the curve, I'm going to increase this to 36, the resolution. I will select the name John. I'm going to right click on this, and I'm going to set the origin to center of mass. I'm going to press Shift S and put this in the center of our viewport, so the cursor is in the center, and that's what we want. I'm all going to do the same with the word Wendy. We're going to set the origin to center of mass, press Shift S, and move that to the center. Okay. Got that the way I want. And let's see, we've got Wendy selected, and Wendy's going to be the emerald, so we're going to put Wendy on this side of the emerald, and we'll put John underneath that. To do this, I need to apply this to the, apply a curve modifier to this. It's pretty simple. So with that name selected, and I'm going to come over here, and I'm just going to type in TXT Wendy, and then we're going to come over here, I'm going to change this to TXT John. And that works for us. We've got path 1, path 2, and we've got, this should be emerald. And this should be ruby. Okay, I've got that done. So far, so good. So let's select John, and we're going to put John on the ruby, and Wendy will be on the emerald. So with John selected and we've got everything centered, we want to apply a curve modifier to that, and we want to make this go around the circle here. So here's what I'm going to do. I select John. I'm going to come over here and select the curve modifier, and I will select path 1. And you can see it put John on the bottom. Why did it do that? Because it's the way it works. Now we're going to rotate that, or we're going to bring that all the way around. So grab the red arrow here, and we're going to bring John up to the top. Now, so far so good, except John is not located in the middle of the ring. We need John to be located more towards the bottom. Okay, and our cursor with the curve modifier is way over here. How terrible. Okay, so to fix that, what we're going to do is we're going to come over to the word John. We're going to press right click on that, set origin to 3D cursor, and you can see it puts it right back in the middle. Now I can work with this and a little bit more specific. I'm going to grab that green arrow, I'm going to move John over there, and you can see John, if we come over to our invisible mode, is sunken about halfway into the top of the ring, which is pretty good. That's what we're looking for. Okay, I'm going to come back out of invisible mode, and we are going to select Wendy. And again, we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to add in a curve modifier for Wendy, and we are going to select path 2. And I have to bring that all the way up to the top, just like so. And let's look at Wendy over here. She's a little bit small, so let's make her a little bit bigger. So with Wendy selected, oops, hit the S key to size that up, and I'm going to size that up. I should have done this before. Just about like so. And again, the cursor is way over here. I don't know why that happens. This is something that happens with the curve modifier. I'm going to right click on that and set the center of origin to 3D cursor. Okay, now I can move that over to the emerald. And now you can see we're not quite good with Wendy. She's a little off yet. So let's move her over like that. Okay, so far so good. Now we're not done yet. We've got our gemstones placed and we got our names there. And I think that's looking pretty good. Not perfect, but I think it looks pretty good. I can move this over if I need to. I can move John over and kind of get these two centered. That would be a much nicer look for this particular ring. So let's do that. Let's select the ruby. Let's hold the shift key down and grab this path right there. And we'll use because we used the Jewelcraft distribute to curve tool, we're going to recurve that. And I can come over here and select this little purple button here. And where it says start and finish, I'm just going to move the start location to about here. And with that done, now I can grab the word John and I can grab the red arrow over here and I can move John right about like that. Okay, so if we're looking at this from the top down, we see we're not interfering with each other. Let's see here, right there. We've got that looking pretty decent. It's actually pretty good. I think this is going to come out well. Okay, so I have to do a couple more things here now. We have to convert the two text objects to meshes. Now this is where it gets a little bit complicated because these have to be meshed, or these have to be converted to a mesh and then remeshed because of the way when you take a curve object, convert it to a mesh, it doesn't really make a perfect mesh. It kind of screws it up a little bit if you understand what I mean. So I'm going to do that first and then we're going to take a look at that. I am going to hit the apply button on the word John so that we apply the curve. Now I can get rid of this path if I want. Actually I can't because the ruby's stuck to it, but if we wanted to we could eliminate it and John would stay in place. Now I'm going to right click on the word John. I'm going to come over here to convert to a mesh and we've converted it to a mesh. So if I hit the tab key now, instead of going to edit the text mode, you can see we've got this weird looking mesh with all these straight lines in it. This is not going to work as a cutout very well when we try to cut a name into our ring shank. So to do this, I'm going to select that, go back into object mode and use a modifier called remesh. And if you've been following my videos, you know I like to use this. I'm going to stick with voxel. And under voxel size, I'm going to select 0.35 or 0.035, 0.035 and press enter. And now that changes it. Now you can see it kind of messed up the word John, and what we have to do is hit shade smoothing, and it's still kind of screwed up. So voxel will not work with certain fonts that are, like the letter O where it has a hole in it. Let's come over to the smooth tool and let's jump this up to, let's say 8 and see if that works. And now you might have to uncheck remove disconnected, and you can see that works a little bit better. And I'm going to jump this up to 9 just to make sure. It's going to add a lot of detail to our mesh or our word John, but don't worry about that for now. With that done, and I like the way that looks, I'm going to hit apply all. And now I'm going to go into edit mode, and you can see we've got a nice object here. And what I should have done was convert this over to a mesh before I put it on here, but we're just going to leave it the way it is. Okay, so let's look at John, and now we want to cut this out of our ring. Again, let's press the boolean difference, the non-destructive version. So I've got John selected. I'm going to hold the shift key down, select our ring shank, and use the brush boolean difference tool. Takes a second, and that'll go and remove John from our ring shank. So there it is. So far, so good. Okay, let's grab the word Wendy here. So text Wendy. With that selected, we're going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to right click on this, convert this to a mesh. I am going to add the remesh modifier just like so. I'm going to select smooth, remove disconnected faces. We're going to let's bring this out so you can see what that is. Remove disconnected. We're going to keep that unchecked. We're going to drop this up to 9 or bring that up to 9. And it gives a lot more detail to the word Wendy. And with that done, I'll hit apply. And now I can select the word Wendy, hold the shift key down, select our ring shank, and use a non-destructive difference. just to test and make sure that it worked okay. Again, the more detail you have in your model, the longer it will take. So the word Wendy came out perfect. Let's see here. John's there, Wendy's there. Now we just have to deal with the two stones. Now they're offset, so they're going to be recessed. They're kind of be like gypsy set into this particular ring. So we have to add in the cutouts for these. I'm going to select both the ruby and the emerald. I'm going to come over to Jewel Craft, since we use the Jewel Craft tool to add in our gemstones, and I will add in the cutters. So I'm going to select that. Now my cutters are red, and that's just because that's the color I selected to have those done. And I'm going to put this in invisible mode so we can see what it looks like when we're going straight through. We're going to zoom in, and there's our cutters, and I'm going to just make sure they're deep enough. So under the hole, we've got that done. What I want to do is make the girdle wider. So I'm going to come over to the girdle tool. Under top of the girdle, I'm going to bring that up, and that should bring up our girdle so that if we look at this now, you can see we're going to have a nice recess in our ring for gypsy setting. Okay, so I'm going to select this cutout there. I'm going to hold the shift key down and select our ring shank. And now I'm going to do a permanent deletion of that, or a permanent cutout. And I'll go to my boolean tool under edit tab, boolean difference, and I'm going to cut that hole right out of the ring. Okay, so with that one done, we'll do the next one. So select that cutout, hold the shift key down, select our ring shank, and then do a boolean difference. Now guys, if you're having any issues with the Boolean tool built into Blender 2.9 or 9.1, I would suggest downloading an add-on called Booltron. It's from the same developer as Jewelcraft. It works a little faster. It does have, it's probably just as accurate cutting in as the Boolean tool in Blender 2.9. There are some cases where the Boolean tool or the Blender Boolean tool works better than the Booltron Boolean, so just keep that in mind. I use both of them depending on what function I'm using. Okay, so I've got that done. That's our ring shank. Now what I want to do is make this cutout permanent. So I'm going to come over to the letter Wendy, and we're going to select our ring shank. We're going to come over to modifiers and see if there's anything there. There's not, so I'm going to select this box here, and under Boolean, I can apply brush and make that permanent. And we're going to do the same here, apply brush. And I can also remove the brush. Oops, and if I do that, it screws up. So we'll hit apply brush. Okay, so that's gone. Let's get rid of John. X will delete that. And let's get rid of the cutout for Wendy. And now that's our ring. That's what our ring looks like. Now I've got these all set. I could remove the curves if I want. Everything's placed in position. I just want to show you what this is going to look like as a rendered object. And here's the final results of the render. It took a few minutes to do. I did this in both gold and I redid one in silver, but I wanted to show you what it looks like. And I'm also showing you, like, what I typically do is put a little bit of enameling or some antiquing inside the lettering so that they just stand out a little bit. That way, they show up, because sometimes you can get lost in the same color of the metal if it's just a light cut out. So there's the two examples. Now it's off to do some 3D printing. So let's get set up with that. File, export, STL. I'm going to save this in the same folder, and we'll call this ring2.stl. We're going to hit selection only and export that. Let's bring up Sheet2Box, and let's go to open, and we'll open up that STL. And there is our ring. And if we look at it closely, you can see it looks perfect. So now what I want to do is I'm going to tilt this over on the Y or the x-axis. Select, rotate. I'm going to hit rotate 45. There we go, just like so. With our ring selected, I can go ahead and add my supports. I'm going to use medium supports on this particular ring, guys. I'm going to hit all and just let Sheet2Box go ahead and fill it all in. And so far, so good. I like the way that looks. Doesn't look like I've got any islands anywhere. And let's come back over here. We're going to hit our settings. I'm going to print this on my Frozen Sonic Mini Mono machine. So we're going to go and set the printer. We're not going to cast this in jewelry resin. We're going to print this in, let's see, basic gray, frozen gray. There we go, right there. And I'm going to select 1.3 millimeters, 1.2 seconds. That should work out well. And I do not want anti-aliasing. The reason I don't want the anti-aliasing is because I want the detail in the letters. So there we go. That looks pretty good. Now I'm going to hit slice. And that zip through that. It's going to take about an hour to print this. And I will save this out to my memory stick, Frozen Sonic Mini, and we will call this Mother's Ring, and export that. Okay, it's all exported. I'm going to go take this over to my printer, start printing it, and I'll be back as soon as it's done printing. Okay guys, so here's the result of my 3D print, and I did this in gray hard resin. I forgot to turn off anti-aliasing when I redid this, and unfortunately the letters filled in a little bit too much, so there's a little less detail in there than I would like. But that's the result of it, and I hope this video helps you. I hope you can go out there and make some money doing some family jewelry. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you are not a subscriber, consider subscribing. Thanks a lot, and have a great day.